Welcome to Starline Activations, where we activate inner truth. Today we enter both the embodied and the esoteric layers of this Libra moon. But before we dive into that, there are times where you have a lot to say, but what you are saying, the expression of it, no longer fits how you have been saying it. And that is exactly where this podcast begins. A shift or a recalibration of what used to be my cosmic diary, and that is now shifting into Starline Activations. And the difference sits mainly in the place from where this podcast is being shared. Because I was sharing mostly what was happening in my spiritual life, but now I feel to share from a space that lives beneath the actual experience, the moment that is activating movement. And honestly, there is no coincidence in timing, being that this first episode happens to be under a Libra full moon. And a Libra full moon, yes, it is about relationships, but it is not just about relationships in that sense. Think about a scale. There is a meeting point in the middle, and Libra is that space in between, the field where two energies meet and they create a balance together. The energies meet and they reveal what is true by reflecting and by sharing. And that is exactly what I invite that this space becomes. Not something to just listen to, but something that you can enter with awareness and that becomes part of an activation. And I have a feeling that the things in this episode or in this podcast in general, that they will be just adding words to something that is already lit inside of you. And if you found this, I am sure that you have walked already through awakenings and that you have done inner work, but that there might be sometimes still this moment where something just doesn't feel in alignment, that you feel slightly out of balance or fragmented, or that even some doubt might come in. And the truth is that is exactly the space where I am sharing this from, because I truly believe that yes, we do this work alone. It is an inner journey, but that inner journey gets activated and it gets triggered sometimes, and at times we feel supported and held by the mirrors around us. But what I'm trying to say is that it holds polarity, and sometimes it makes the journey easier and faster and it makes it more expansive, but in other times it also makes the journey hard, painful, and it can make it feel lonely. And that polarity, that is such a topic, because it is as above as below, as within as without. It all comes back to one, and we will get there, but let's first explore this Libra full moon. Some facts. A full moon happens when the moon and the sun are standing across each other, eye to eye in the sky. And currently we have the sun in Aries exactly opposite the moon in Libra, both at 12 degrees. The full moon is at the 2nd of April, and this full moon is not just a romantic or love full moon that you might automatically think of when you think of Libra, because this full moon is forming a T-square with Jupiter in Cancer. And in very easy words, this is creating a tension triangle where different parts of ourselves want different things. And under this full moon, we realize what part wants different things and what is actually not in coherence, what is missing to be in alignment between those different areas, between those different parts of ourselves. That point is exactly what this Libra full moon is illuminating. The sun in Aries says, I am here, I exist, I move without asking, I move on instinct. But then the moon in Libra says, but can you still exist in that energy if you are being seen? Can you remain that exact authentic self, that same person, if someone is standing right in front of you? Is the core of your inner center strong and unshakable while still remaining in connection? And that right there is creating the focus point where you can go into the low or the high road of Libra and Aries. Aries in its low road becomes reactive. It becomes self-centered and disconnected from impact. And Libra, on the other hand, in its low road becomes too adaptive. It abandons itself and it disconnects from making any decisions. And what then can happen in that situation is not speaking your full truth to be understood, not showing up completely as you are because being liked in that moment is more important. Or when connection is chosen but at the cost of being fully yourself. And ultimately, what then happens is that connection is chosen, but at the cost of being fully yourself. The most advice that I've heard in those situations is set boundaries, walk away, but isn't that still a form of polarity? Because if choosing yourself means to have lost connection, there is still a split. It would mean acting from the belief that those two, being yourself and having connection, cannot coexist at once. And then we repeat and we meet new connections. And the circle continues and we follow the same patterns until what? I personally think with the Libra full moon, there is the possibility of doing deeper work. Because ending the need to choose one over the other means that there is no longer separation. Because the union then comes from within. And perhaps it is being fully yourself with yourself and being in connection with that without having to find an outer connection. Perhaps that is then the connection. And this sounds very easy and difficult at the same time, being in connection with yourself. Because in a way it goes against our belief system. Think of it as in Aries and Libra. Aries thinks like an Aries. I am, I react. Or like a Libra, we connect. But the thing is, we are taught that they are opposites. But what happens with opposites? They create synergy when they meet in the middle. That is the space where we actually expand, where they become one and where they unite. And that right there is the point of coherence. It is the alignment between the different points within ourselves. And many say that inner union comes from healing your wounds. And I agree, but with a side note, for as far as I can say, because I am on that journey myself, I am still walking that. But how I see it is as an inner journey without feeling the need to fix ourselves. Because healing wounds comes from the awareness of acceptance rather than from the idea that something is wrong that needs fixing. Because fixing, that just creates further inner separation, which does not lead to inner union. But to stay and to feel your wounds, to hold it, but not let yourself be stuck inside of them, not to bypass it, but to just truly see and feel it. And that can feel very uncomfortable because that has capacity to stay open when closing just feels natural, to trust and to stay grounded even when doubt comes or when fear comes, but to stay with it and to stay open, to hold it. That is asking true capacity. And this is where this full moon comes in very strong, because it is not just about Aries and Libra. It is actually also about Cancer and Capricorn, because they are holding the tension. Both the Sun and Moon are squared by Jupiter in Cancer. And Jupiter in Cancer actually says, I will make all emotional memories of attachment patterns visible. So that adds another layer to why, rather calling this a romantic full moon, I would call it an activation full moon, an opportunity. With Jupiter moving through Cancer, it is amplifying emotional memory. Jupiter in Cancer is pulling you towards what feels familiar, but familiarity, not necessarily alignment. And that confusion can feel very real. The tension of this tension square, the medicine of this tension square, then falls into Capricorn. Structure and holding yourself responsible to stay in reality and to not lose yourself in repeating old patterns, to not stay within that familiarity. Because whenever there is a T-square, like with Jupiter squaring both the Sun and the Moon, there is also the alignment point right across from Cancer. And therefore this point, this medicine of this T-square falls into Capricorn, is the release point. And Capricorn is asking for self-leadership, because you can understand patterns and still at the same time repeat them. You can see the wounds, but at the same time still be completely shaken up once they are triggered. So it's not just about the awareness, it's about what you do, how you act once you have the awareness. And that doesn't mean that it's always going to be easy and that you never fall into old patterns, but it does mean that every time it gets a little bit easier. And that is where this Earth Capricorn comes in, repeating things over time, bringing awareness into embodiment with self-leadership. And this full moon in Libra is not gently showing where coherence is missing. A full moon in general is not that subtle. It is revealing. It is really shining and illuminating, almost exposing something, like full bright lights shining on something and bringing that something into awareness that you have been tolerating or that you have been participating in. And the opportunity and the activation under this full moon is recognizing that moment where you would usually close off or adapt yourself or not stay true to yourself, and this time choose different. And that is exactly where also Venus is coming in. The ruler of this lunation is Venus as the ruler of Libra, and Venus sits at 3 degrees of Taurus under this lunation. And Venus loves to be in Taurus because it is also ruling Taurus. It rules 2 signs, and it is ruling actually Libra and Taurus. At the surface level, Venus is about attraction, but the deeper expression of Venus is what you can attract to your field and hold it without breaking. And how this can show up is if a deep connection destabilizes you, or if this deep connection is actually making you feel grounded. Because an integrated Venus can hold connection without having it to mean anything about its own value. And another way of it showing up is whether intimacy makes you feel like leaving yourself or having to compromise yourself in any way, or if it makes you feel closer to yourself. Because an integrated Venus can be intimate and give and receive without changing any meaning to itself, which then also comes back again to having that core within, being already complete and whole from within. And that is so much what this full moon is illuminating, with Aries having its own strong identity and Libra mirroring itself through others. Aries is searching for itself and Libra searches for the other, but it all comes back to the realization of being both within oneself. I once heard that you are not looking for someone else to make you whole, you are looking for another whole person. And that makes so much sense to me, because if you are living from the frequency that you are whole from within, you will naturally attract someone that also lives on that frequency. And vibrating together from a frequency of wholeness, that just creates synergy. That creates a field of support and unconditional love, because there is no longer attachment, there is just choice. And I believe that is the higher frequency of the axis between Aries and Libra. And then adding another layer to it, a galactic astrology layer from a higher harmonic point. The fixed star Arcturus sits on 24 degrees of Libra, which is in opposition to Chiron, 25 degrees of Aries. That adds another layer of the possibility that this full moon feels confronting, like the saying, having a hard look in the mirror. Arcturus carries a frequency of higher harmony that comes with truth, and it comes with authenticity. In a very direct way, it is exactly showing where there is no harmony. And Chiron is the wounded healer, and collectively it sits in Aries. And with Chiron in Aries, it can show up. And then if you combine the two of Arcturus on one hand and Chiron on the other hand, it is creating this feeling of, am I fully safe? Is it fully in harmony to be myself within this connection? And that realization, that mirror, can feel like a confronting mirror. But that level honesty is what this full moon is asking, because ultimately what brings you back to you and stop splitting yourself into two is when the idea stops of inner separation. What I honestly feel to be true is that inner union does not happen when everything is solved or everything is perfect, but it happens when there is this space within to hold every part of you, that every part is allowed and every part is seen and held, and nothing is pushed away or excluded. To have that space within is what creating the higher expression of relating, where no one else is there to complete you, just to share and walk this path with you, to deepen experiences. And under this full moon in Libra, that is the true activation, to deepen that connection within that naturally deepens any connection outside of yourself, that can then meet and hold you at that same frequency. And if it cannot, then that is simply information. Whether this is in the romantic field, whether this is in partnerships, it all comes back to the same thing. And for now, I would invite you to have a look at your own chart and to see where Libra and Aries are showing up in your chart, because that is showing the part that is being activated right now. And I would also have a look at your natal Venus placement, as it is the ruler of this lunation, because your natal Venus will give you an idea of how this activation wants to be integrated. Thank you so much for listening to this first new setup of this podcast, Starline Activations. The next one will probably be under the Aries new moon 2 weeks from now. But if you listen to this and you felt connected to these words and something came up for you, an intuition, a word, please leave it in the comments or send me a message, because I really believe that we create these activations together, that the words that arise are part of weaving together. I'm wishing you all a lovely full moon.